31st of August 1888, the autumn of terror begins. Jack the Ripper strikes for the very first time. He murders Mary and Nichols. A double rip of the neck, vaginal laceration to the breast, and slashing of her intestines furiously. 7 days later, he strikes again. Annie Chapman, the eldest of his victims, 48 years of age. The first in daylight, her body discovered at 5:40 a.m. and the first where he harvests a trophy, removing and taking with him part of her bowel, her uterus, and 3 imitation copper or gold rings. Not another word from Jack the Ripper for 3 whole weeks. We have the infamous double event, starting with the Swedish prostitute Elizabeth Stride, and 45 minutes later, the brutal mutilation of Catherine Eddowes at Mitre Square. Not one more word from Jack the Ripper for 6 whole weeks. Who was Jack the Ripper?
These videos were made with minimum editing involved to give you an authentic feel of the city. Hope you enjoy. What's up, guys? I'm here in London still, but today I'm going to be doing an interesting tour with this beautiful woman right here.
Guys.
She's very mysterious, but she's going to be taking me somewhere. I don't know. Let's find out. All right.
Hello. Hiya. Let's get down there. It's not always like this, but this is... Shall I tell your customers what we're going to do?
Yeah, they're curious now that you brought me through this this alleyway right here.
Okay, guys, my name is Sinead.
Sinead's over parade.
What's that?
Sinead's over parade.
Yeah, that's it. Sinead, like Sinead O'Connor. Excellent.
All right.
And tonight, I'm going to take you on a journey of 1888 Victorian London. Tonight, we're heading back to the Jack the Ripper era, ladies and gents. Stay tuned. An incredible story coming up. Historic for so many particular reasons. Number 1, the mystery. If you've come to the video tonight to find out how Jack the Ripper is, I'm terribly sorry. You're going to be very disappointed with me. But don't just be disappointed with me. Be disappointed with the FBI, the CIA, criminologists from universities all over the world, and what are called Ripperologists. They live, they breathe, they eat, they sleep the Jack the Ripper investigation. If they can't tell you who he is, I certainly don't claim to be able to do so tonight. But I can certainly tell you who I'm pretty sure he is. Tonight we'll also speak about the royal conspiracy, centering around Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avon, the grandson of Queen Victoria. Same succession to the throne in 1888 as Prince George is to this day. It's a great story. Don't we all love a good royal conspiracy? Is that right, Ace?
Absolutely. Wow.
Oh my God, you're so sweet. That's it. Bit of shameless self-promotion, do you mind?
Okay, go ahead.
They might have a look at my own channel as well. Tours by Foot London on YouTube. And tonight, I've projected images courtesy of Ripper Vision, ladies and gents. This handy little projector is going to give us all 5 mortuary photographs of the victims. I will be able to project images for you and bring you right back to 1888 Victorian London. But first, let me head you up here. I need to bring you back to 1888 Victorian London. And in order to do that, let's take you up to the top so we can project some images here.
All right.
Firstly, 1888 Victorian London. London was the richest, largest city in the world, the epicenter of what was called the British Empire. At the time, of course, the largest empire the world had ever seen. Queen Victoria, the reigning monarch. She reigned from 1837 to 1901. Now, Victoria era, everything you imagined it to be. I'm sure, Ace, you've seen Downton Abbey, Call the Midwife, upstairs, downstairs. Opulence, grandeur, and wealth. Ladies who were in beautiful ball gowns and parasol umbrellas. Gentlemen, top hats and tails. Elegant horse-drawn carriages, dinner parties, balls, and mansions in the West End. Not, I'm afraid, the East End, where we're headed tonight. In the richest, largest city in the world, you guys, was Whitechapel, one of the worst third world slums known to humanity. Crime was rife, rape, burglary, sexual crime. Now, murder was not uncommon in this part of town, but it was the ferocious, barbaric nature of the ripping of the torso and the removing of organs of the Jack the Ripper case that gripped the world. In this part of town, you lived hand to mouth, day to day. Nobody had a permanent address, nobody had a fixed abode, mortgage, or rent. For the privilege of sleeping on these 6-inch horsehair mattresses infested with all types of urine, scabies, lice, and feces, in sometimes overcrowded rooms of up to 24 other people, you were charged 4p for the night. You had to earn 4p for that roof over your head. The alternative was you slept on the cold, violent streets of Whitechapel. Or, worse again, in what was called a workhouse, where accommodation was free, but I can assure you, it came with a very large price. 4p, your day-to-day requirement. Now, gentlemen, you had some chance of survival. London, a very busy, rich industrial port. You would queue on the docks for 16 hours of hard days manual labor. And whatever money you earned, you would make it stretch for the week, for the basic human rights of survival: food, accommodation, and clothing. This area was littered with breweries, tanners, and slaughter. Tanners were leather makers, and slaughter houses. The predominant employer for men in Whitechapel in 1888 were butchers and slaughterhouses, making it 90% likely most men at one time would have worked with a knife. Now, gentlemen, some chance of survival. Ladies, we had none at all. If we didn't get a bit of part-time work, cleaning house or doing sewing repair in the richer part of town, and we had sold everything we owned to survive, we were only left with one thing left to sell: ourselves. It is estimated there was up to 3,000 working prostitutes in Whitechapel in 1888. The youngest on record, 6 years of age. Tragic life ensued for these girls. The devil had taken them to the street and the doss house, and the street and back again. But it may have been the worst of times. But as in A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, it could also be the best of times. They made the best of what they had. They drank their problems away. The area was full of cockney wish and charm. Alehouses, pubs, and taverns. Homegrown gin, the drink of choice. The cheapest to make, the quickest to get drunk on. And I'm not talking about a nice little Bombay Sapphire Martini here, my lovelies, or a nice Tanqueray with a twist. I'm talking about pints of homegrown gin. This was the type of gin they brewed in bathtubs, in their back courtyards. It was so potent, it would strip the paint off the bathtubs. Can you imagine what it did to these girls' faces, insides, and livers? It was known as Mother's Ruin because it was widely regarded to be a method of contraception. I think we'll all agree it has the reverse effects nowadays. Isn't that right, Ace?
Yes, absolutely.
Not surprising.
What you just described is some strong alcohol right there.
Amen. Amen. On a par with methylated spirits, if you like. Not surprising, all 5 of Jack the Ripper's victims were sex workers, all 5 chronic alcoholics. Our story begins on the 31st of August, 1888. The Autumn of Terror is about to begin, and the first of the canonical 5, let's talk about Mary Ann Nichols. Mary Ann Nichols. Mary Ann started out reasonably well. She was married at 15, which was commonplace in Victorian times. But at 29, as a result of what was said on the police report, her excessive drinking and her immoral behavior, her marriage crumbles and falls apart. No spousal support coming in and no option. She is working the streets of Whitechapel. You guys, she's drinking that night in this very building here. Ace, just bring you around here and I'll show you. You'll see the old red Victorian sign of what was known as the Frying Pan Pub on Brick Lane. Here's an actual image of it in 1888. So she leaves this pub, she's heading down this very street known as Thrall Street and she's heading to her regular accommodation, we suspect is right.
Wow, that is actually the same building.
That's the exact same building, yeah.
All right.
So she's heading down this very street to her regular accommodation, but she's going without the 4p for her stay. She knocks on the door, landlord turns her away. Not tonight, Mary, no pay, no stay. Now, he wasn't being unreasonable. She owed him a lot of money in back rent.
Right.
But she's wearing a beautiful new bonnet, a jolly new bonnet with a black velvet trim. She's treated herself. She thinks it's going to be good for attracting customers. She said to him, not to worry, sir, look at my lovely new bonnet. Won't take me long to earn fourpence. Keep the room, I shall return. 2 hours later at 2:30 a.m. She is spotted on the Whitechapel High Street by her best friend, Emily Holland. She is drunk out of her mind. She can barely stand. Emily tries to convince her to return to the accommodation, even offering to pay her £4. Again, she's having none of it. She said, I've had my rent money 3 times tonight, Emily. I've drunk it. Won't take me long to earn the 4th. You go back, I'll see you back there. 3:40 a.m. in an area here in London called Bucks Row. This is Bucks Row today. This is Bucks Row in 1888. 2 chaps by the name of Charles Cross and Robert Paul are heading to the river. They're stable hands at Pickford Stable Yard. 5 minutes apart, Charles Cross spots something. What he assumed he said on the police report he thought was a tarpaulin or a bundle of rags or clothing. He gets excited. Of course he does. He thinks he's found something he can sell. He heads over and of course it's the body of a woman. Now she's lying on her back. Her legs are spread. I think you're going to be a bit shocked by these murders, Ace. Your face is like... Anyway, her legs are spread. Her skirt has been lifted. I don't think he realizes what's coming, you guys. Her skirt has been lifted above her neck. Now, he doesn't know if he's drunk, dead, alive, sober breathing, or if she's been sexually assaulted. But I can assure you, he ain't hanging around to find out. He's terrified. A policeman will arrive on the scene and he himself will be incriminated in some form of crime. So when Robert Paul arrives, they leave the crime scene, head towards the docks and say they'll alert the nearest policeman they see en route. And how right he was, because 2 minutes later comes Police Constable Neil. He sees her. Move on, you can't sleep here, on you go. But of course she doesn't move. So to protect her decency, he removes the skirt from around her neck. And when he does, he notices her throat has been violently slit from left to right, right to left, all the way around the back to her vertebrae, about a centimetre incision apart. He immediately calls for assistance. The Metropolitan Police arrive on the scene. Her body stays in that position for 3 hours, while the Metropolitan Police take sketches of the crime scene. Dr. Llewellyn arrives. He declares life extinct. But he also remarks about something rather curious. There's a distinct lack of blood at the crime scene for such a traumatic neck injury. This puzzles him. The body is removed. It's taken back to Whitechapel Workhouse mortuary. A bucket of water, you guys, thrown all over the evidence.
Gone.
Forensic science in 1888. Now it's there. It's in its infancy. But they're certainly not using it as of yet in either police department in London, of which we have 2. Very important part of this investigation. I will elaborate later on the City of London Police and the Metropolitan Police. He's beginning his post-mortem examination, and as he does, he's removing her clothing. And he notices she's wearing 9 layers of clothing. Prostitutes had no permanent address, so everything they own, they carried on their person. She's wearing her entire wardrobe, and this explains the blood. Because as he's removing each layer, the blood is coagulated between each layer of her clothing and matted in the back of her head. But it wasn't until he removed that final layer he discovered the extent of her barbaric injuries. Ladies and gentlemen, Jack the Ripper has repeatedly plunged his knife into her genital organ. He has ripped it wide open, extending his rip to her breasts. He has pulled back her skin, and in some sort of misogynistic psychotic frenzy, he has taken his sharp blade and he has slashed and shredded her entire intestines furiously. If only you could see Ace's face right now, ladies and gents. He's a bit shocked at the moment. But particular focus was always on the female reproductive organs. This is the mortuary photograph of Mary Ann Nichols in her coffin. Let's get this ready for you. Note the swollen face of death and the laceration on the neck. That is when the greatest detective London has ever seen, the 14-year veteran of the Metropolitan Police Department, is immediately assigned to the case. And I know what you're all thinking right now. And I know what Ace is thinking.
Sherlock Holmes?
I'm afraid he's a fictional character. If I could tell you the amount of times people have asked me why they didn't
I was
get
like, I
Sherlock
know it's
Holmes
Holmes.
to help in the
It's Robert
investigation.
Jr. Downing.
You're so bad. Detective Chief Inspector Abeline. Played by some of the greatest actors of our generation, actually. He's been played by Michael Caine in the 1988 series. And of course, the most famous man to play him, the devastatingly handsome, younger Johnny Depp. If you're watching, Johnny, you're still handsome, sweetheart. Anyway, determined to bring this butcher to justice, he heads into the neighborhood, he retraces her steps. He interviews everyone that has ever spoken to Marianne Nichols, and he cannot come up with one clue. There's not one person had a bad word to say about poor old sweet Marianne. But he doesn't have to wait too long, because exactly to the day, 7 days later, he strikes again. Ladies and gentlemen, this time he murders Annie Chapman at 29 Hanbury Street. And that is the next stop on tonight's tour. But in order to get there, we have to pass 60 delicious Indian restaurants. Let's go. 29 Hanbury Street, 31 Hanbury Street. 29, 31.
So this is
29,
29 right here,
31.
31.
Pillar to pillar. Okay? So
Wow.
slot that, you get it?
I
Slot
get it.
that image right where we are. Okay?
Right.
2 entrances to the building. One entrance led upstairs to the accommodation. For reference there, Ace, have a look behind you at the 2 red doors. See the 2 red doors? These buildings, by the way, are all original to the 1700s. So 2 entrances to the building. One entrance led upstairs to the accommodation. The other entrance went straight through to the communal courtyard in the back. That entrance was left open through the night for what were known as soil men. Soil men, their job was to pick up feces and urine. No flushing toilets in this area. So you had a pot for one, a pot for the other. But did you know this, Ace? Urine was quite lucrative because you could sell urine on to leather makers. It was used in the tanning industry. So if you were really poor, you didn't have a pot to pee in.
Wow.
Hence the expression. That made these courtyards the perfect place for prostitutes to conduct their business. Annie Chapman, the eldest of Jack the Ripper's victims, was 48 years of age. Annie I have the absolute most sympathy for. Annie was dying of tuberculosis. Even when they did the post-mortem examination on her body, they said she wouldn't have had any more than 3 weeks to live. If Jack the Ripper hadn't brutally murdered her, the streets of Whitechapel were coming very close. But Annie was so poorly that night, she begged her landlord, she pleaded with him to let her stay. He heartlessly turfed her out on the street with no place to go. She is spotted outside the front of 29 Hanbury Street, speaking to a gentleman who's described as 5'7", 5'8", pale complexion, mustache. This gentleman is wearing a deerstalker hat like Sherlock Holmes and a long dusty overcoat. He has his hand on her chest. He said to her, "Will you?" To which she replied, "I will." She heads in behind this back courtyard with said gentleman approximately 5:15 a.m. 5:25 a.m., a man called Albert Kalash. He's heading to work. He lives upstairs at number 31.
Right.
He comes down into the opposite side of this fence in the courtyard to use the facilities. He overhears her screaming, "No!" But you guys, this is Whitechapel in the middle of the night. There's drunks, there's overcrowding, domestic abuse. He doesn't think someone's being murdered. He's heading to work. He goes around the corner, and we'll show you the church in just a moment, Christchurch, Spitalfields, and he records the time as 5:32 a.m. 5:40 a.m., a man called John Davis comes downstairs and discovers the body of Annie Chapman. Ladies and gentlemen,
Wow.
she's slumped against the fence. Her throat has been slit, left to right, right to left. This time, he plunges his knife into her anus and extends the rip the whole way around her vaginal area and above her breasts, practically cutting her in two. He removes her intestines and throws them over the left-hand shoulder. Jack the Ripper has removed and taken with him part of her bowel, and this time he's removed and taken with him her uterus. But something rather curious happens at this crime scene that doesn't at the rest. He very meticulously and neatly lays her possessions out in front of her, in the form of a piece of muslin, a wooden comb, and 2 pills. Ironically, the pills she was taking for tuberculosis. But something else is missing in the form of 3 imitation copper or gold rings she always wore. Even when the prostitutes went to identify her body, they wanted to know where was Annie's copper rings. This is an artist's impression of the crime scene of Annie Chapman.
Oh, I can't show you that, guys.
No? And the next one is the mortuary photograph of Annie Chapman. So we've had 2 murders so far, the 31st of August 1888 and the 8th of September 1888. All is quiet. Actually, 3 days away, the 8th of September,
right,
for the second victim. All is quiet for nearly 3 whole weeks. And on the 30th of September, Jack the Ripper doesn't strike once in a night, he strikes twice. In what is now known as the infamous double event, he starts his murderous rampage with the Swedish prostitute Elizabeth Stride. But before we talk about the double event, I want to show you around Whitechapel today, but what was also Whitechapel in 1888. So if you've ever seen shows like Downton Abbey, Call the Midwife, Ripper Street, Poldark,
right,
any of the periodic movies, they always film around here. So this is the beautiful Wilk Street. This is one of the traditional 19th century streets in Britain. They're absolutely beautiful. Murray Street was on the roof of one of these buildings here in the movie Suffragette, inciting the girls towards violence. The incredible show Luther was also filmed around here. So these would have been here.
The same way they look now?
I mean, not as beautifully kept as they are now.
Right, but
traditionally, yes. There would have been slums.
Okay.
Like the Doss houses,
right,
where they slept in big rooms. The buildings today regularly go for anywhere from 5 to 12 million.
Yeah, that's about. That's it.
It's so beautiful.
That's it.
Like this location. I see, even if you see around here, and that's a beautiful image there. I love with Christchurch Spitalfields in the background as well, the beautiful church. So we're in the heart of Ripperland right now.
Yeah, I'm just absorbing the energy and just trying to hear the horses and the people just running, the noise,
craziness.
People selling on the street.
Absolutely packed with people living under the same roof.
Would there be prostitutes walking down the streets?
Back alleyways everywhere. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these girls were victims of Jack the Ripper. They weren't, it's very important that people recognize that they were victims of circumstance. He brutally murdered these girls. They were daughters, they were mothers. They're still very important girls, and just because they were victims of circumstance. Jack the Ripper is not some famed London historic character. He's an absolute psychopath who brutally murdered these girls.
I don't know if this is going to be part of the tour,
but
what do you think about his psyche? I mean, what you mentioned to me reminded me of a movie I seen, like what was it called? Some Slaughter of the Lamb, something with the lamb.
Yeah, Silence of the Lambs with Anthony Hopkins, and Jodie Foster. It's incredible.
Hannibal Lecter,
of course.
right.
Well, the psychological profile of the FBI is something we'll discuss towards the end, but I don't want to spoil the surprise yet. Cool. Is that okay?
No.
Because
that means keep watching, guys. Don't be trying to leave.
We don't want to spoil the surprise either, do we?
Right.
But let me take you around here. These are beautiful homes.
Okay, cool.
And this is very traditional 19th century. The next street even has a French name because you had a massive influx of migrants to this area. 1700s, the French Huguenots arrived, fleeing persecution in Catholic France. There was a safe haven here in Protestant England. So they brought with them the major industry here in the 1700s was the silk weaving industry. When the Industrial Revolution took off, the ports expanded to all over the world. So cheaper textiles became more freely available from Asia. The Huguenots were gone. That's when the Jewish arrived. Ladies and gentlemen, in the entire East End, it's estimated up to 80,000 Jewish people lived here. They were fleeing their own persecution in Tsarist Russia. I mean, my own people came with them, the Irish. They were fleeing their own issues in England, and it's not, well, Ireland, it's not because the English and Irish were very good friends at the time, but they were actually en route to the US on what were known as coffin ships, which are pretty self-explanatory. So these ships were rife with diphtheria, cholera, scurvy, dysentery. I mean, if you were physically fit or able-bodied, you would attempt that 3-week journey to the US. But if you were the elderly or the most vulnerable, you got off the ships on the coastal towns of Britain. 1970 saw the Bangladeshis arrive. We just walked down the incredible, what they call Curry Mile. And the final wave of migration came most recently. Enter the hipsters, my lovelies. And they came with their quinoa and their coffee and avocados. So the point I'm making, you had a massive boiling pot of racial tension to deal with as well in Victorian London, and particularly the East End, and that was geared towards the Jewish community. Speaking of which, these buildings here are very 18th century, very French Huguenot. All these, and the silk weavers and the looms will be kept at the top for maximum light. They used to stuff like rags and into the floorboards to muffle out the sounds of the loom where they did the weaving. An incredible part of town. I mean, there's so much history here. This mosque down here, ladies and gents, is a listed building as well. This is the Jami Masjid Mosque, where you see the colourful light on top.
Right.
This is the only building in London that's been a site of worship for the Calvinists, the French Huguenots. It was a Jewish synagogue in the 1800s, and now it's one of the biggest mosques in London. So that's also an incredible building. I mean, Angelina Jolie was here. She filmed the movie, I think it was it Eternals? It's kind of like a Marvel movie where she jumps into different centuries. I think it kind of tanked, but sorry. And she filmed along here. So this is practically, again, a movie set, because all they had to do that day was put little...
right, it's so
fruit,
easy.
You know, just little fruit stalls outside the front to make it look atmospheric.
Right.
Well, wait till we turn the corner and I'll show you what's next.
Okay.
All the buildings we're going to see right now are original. And one of them is absolutely imperatively significant in the Jack the Ripper case.
Okay.
So, this building here, where we're going to finish up tonight, for the final murder. So the final murder of Jack the Ripper is still described to this day by the FBI as one of the most complex crime scenes in history. It was also the very first forensic crime scene photograph in history. He mutilated Mary Jane Kelly beyond all recognition. The only way she could be identified was by the clothing she was wearing the night before. Underneath that building is where this crime took place.
Underneath this building?
Right directly. Now, you have to imagine this building doesn't exist.
Right.
There was a street that ran right through the center of that building called Dorset Street.
Right there.
Right, we'll say, it went roughly right through the center. That street was the most dangerous street in London at the time, making it the most dangerous street in the United Kingdom. If you walked down Dorset Street at night time, you didn't come out with your possessions. You were lucky if you came out alive. The police went down Dorset Street in force. That was the address of the final victim of Jack the Ripper, Mary Jane Kelly. What fascinates me is when Jack the Ripper walked out of that crime scene after mutilating her beyond all recognition, he would have seen the exact same 3 buildings we're standing under right now. Jack the Ripper, have a look at this amazing building, would have seen Christchurch Spitalfields. This wonderful Nichols church. There's been a church on that site since the 1770s.
This church is an old church.
It's been here since 1770.
No disrespect.
Well, it's not Westminster Abbey. The Abbey's been there 1,000 years, but still, Nicholas Hawkmoor. There's been a church on this site since the 1770s. That's how the people of Whitechapel told the time, including Albert Kellosh, remember, on his way to work after hearing Annie Chapman screaming no. He would have seen Spitalfields Market. There has been a market on that site since the reign of King Charles II, 1660s. That particular building, and it's written on top there, was opened in 1887 by Queen Victoria, but finally, and you're going to die, the 10 Bells pub. So most likely, all 5 of Jack the Ripper's victims would have drank in that pub. Mary Jane Kelly, the final victim of Jack the Ripper, was drinking in that pub the night she was brutally murdered right underneath this.
So I'm just assuming he's hanging out right here.
He's frequenting around here. He's drinking. Most likely would have had a drink in there. You have to walk into the 10 Bells pub.
I'm already assuming I know who it is.
Inside this 10 Bells pub is pretty much the same interior as it was in 1888. Even down to the mosaic on the back wall. They recreated this for the From Hell movie with Johnny Depp.
Okay.
It's a London Dungeons exhibit for Jack the Ripper. I can't guarantee you're going to get a 2-pound pint of gin in there, my lovely, but make sure you get some footage. And we're going to continue on, and we're going to start with the double event.
Double event, okay. But wow, this is I didn't even look at the church actually when we were just walking around.
Sometimes it's lit up in pink as well. It's beautiful.
Right.
It's a beautiful, beautiful piece.
Who would stay at that church? What type of church is that? Catholic church or?
Oh no, that's Church of England.
Okay,
Church of England, yeah.
Okay.
So it's like Protestant church. But there's some beautiful Catholic churches in London as well.
I'm assuming, my mind is assuming the person was here.
Oh, Jack the Ripper would have frequented around here.
No, I'm thinking the person was in this church. I think that's the person who did this.
Who? The architect?
Why? Because he's just right there,
No,
and he, talking. Hey, you sinners, come over here.
Too nice.
And with a twisted fate of mind on women and misogyny and being deprived of being what the person wanted to be, did what he did.
It's a good idea. Good idea. It's a theory. Everybody has a theory on Jack the Ripper, you know? Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to let you have a quick look inside there. I don't know how they are about filming, but I'm sure they're okay.
I'm going to get it. Actually the bathroom, and so I'm assuming this was also available during the time of Jack the Ripper. And was just looking at of course there was some maintenance done and everything here.
So this was a workhouse. This was the end of the road. I mean, you literally had no place else to go. Do you remember when I told you earlier on about the people with the potential for 4 pence? What about the people with no earning potential? And they were there in their thousands. I mean, you had orphan children abandoned by parents who couldn't afford to feed them, living in pickpocketing gangs. Where did they go with their money? They were shoved in here. And what about the elderly that survived the lifespan? They can't turn a trick. They can't do 16 hours of hard days manual labor. They too were shoved in here. They had no money. So this was their only refuge. It was like a refuge.
Okay.
6-inch horsehair mattresses, coffin-shaped boxes, infested with all types of urine, scabies, lice and feces. Here was the women's entrance. The men's entrance we'll see on the other side. When you arrived, the dormitories slept 200. Again, coffin-shaped boxes, 6-inch horsehair mattresses infested with all types of urine, scabies, lice and feces. If the beds were gone, you were offered a rope that was tied around your waist and attached to the wall, and you slept like that.
What?
They were known as hangers-on.
What?
Sometimes they just slept over the rope. You were given a bowl of gruel and a piece of bread so rock hard it had to be soaked in boiling water in order for you to take a bite. You were required in some of these places to take a bath in the same bath water that could have been changed once a month.
Oh my gosh.
People with infectious skin diseases like scabies, rat bites, and for the privilege of this accommodation, you had 16 hours of hard days manual labor, breaking rock, picking rope, and something to do with sorting of matches. But if I can spin any positives from all these negatives, Remember I told you about the publicity?
Right.
People all over the world were reading about Jack the Ripper. 1 million newspapers a day were being printed. The New York Times reported daily. The Sun newspaper here in the UK reported that Jack the Ripper was an escaped baboon from London Zoo. Nobody believed any human being was capable of such atrocity. But people started to take notice all over the world. They started to question why in the richest, largest city in the world were their own citizens living in these horrendous conditions. Massive social reform came about as a result of the deaths of these girls. And I genuinely like you to think they didn't die in vain. In fact, they changed the course of history for future generations to come. But I want to give you kind of a sense of the loss that existed in this country for murder and for execution. And I want to show you, there are certain words we use in our language to this day. The etymology of the British language is a fascinating subject. And I just want to show you how we casually use these words. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. And it relates back to these terrible dark times. Between 1136 and 1868, 200,000 people were publicly executed in London. If you approach an area here in London called Marble Arch, there's a circular plaque at the back of the arch that commemorates what was called the Tyburn tree. Now, the Tyburn tree wasn't a tree, it was a big wooden structure with 3 arms like a gallows. And it is estimated 24 people at the same time could be hung from the Tyburn tree. But don't get me wrong, public execution days in this country were like Glastonbury, Coachella Music Festival, Berlin Love Parade. 60,000 people would arrive for the great public hanging. You brought your children. There was market stalls and juggling. And with any great festival comes alcohol. And plenty of it. They danced, they drank, they partied all night long on cheap gin. Naturally, they weren't too healthy when they woke up the day over the hanging.
Oh my God.
Hangover.
Oh
my! The day over festivities of drunken public hangings. Not only that, now some of you, your customers might know this expression. It's quite generic. It's very Irish and English. You know the way they get a last meal on death row in the US?
Right.
In this country, when the prison officer was bringing the prisoners in the horse and wagon to execution, he was legally allowed to bring the prisoners into the pub because people would donate money en route for one last drink for the road. One for the road. You might know that one, but a lot of your Irish customers will. But he wouldn't take a drink, the prison officer, because he was on the wagon.
Oh my gosh.
Casually, we still reference these expressions to this day. The money would be donated by patrons en route as a charity for the people, the prisoners facing execution. In fact, there's a lot of records of these people actually being completely intoxicated before
so they didn't
actually
know
executed.
Isn't
that crazy? And there's the men's entrance here. So even though they weren't segregated, there's the men's entrance.
Wow. And so,
Women's entrance, men's entrance.
And they were segregated inside.
Inside. The 200...
for obvious reasons.
Well, yeah. But I mean, obviously there was relations, let's say, in the middle of the night. So, we're going to head now into what's called the City of London.
Right.
People don't realise this. The City of London is its own separate county. It's only 1.1 square mile. It's the most ancient historic part of Greater London. The significance to Jack the Ripper is 2 separate police forces. We'll get into that in a moment. Do you see, Ace, these black, white and red poles?
Yeah.
Please don't worry about this. 80% of Londoners don't realise this. We have now just entered into what's called the City of London.
Are you serious? Isn't this London right here?
The London Eye has 32 pods to represent the 2 cities and the 30 boroughs of London. The City of Westminster, 1,000 years old. Big Ben, the Houses of Parliament, Buckingham Palace, Piccadilly Circus, Covent Garden, Leicester Square, Mayfair, Belgravia. 1,000 years old. The City of London, 2,000 years old. It's only 1.1 square mile inside Greater London. This is where the Romans landed in AD 43, establishing the city of Londinium. They built a huge Roman wall around the city, evidence of which you'll still see at the Tower of London and the City of London to this day. There were 7 gates into the city: Aldgate, Ludgate, Bishopsgate, Moorgate, Cripplegate. You get the idea. The Roman Empire has fallen. The Romans are gone. 1,000 years later, William the Conqueror of Normandy in France invades this country. He finds it much easier to conquer people in grass huts and mud huts than penetrate inside those city walls. So he agrees to leave the citizens of the City of London to their own devices, provided they recognize him as king. To this day, the City of London, which is 1.1 square mile, has its own police force, its own Lord Mayor, its own governing body, and its own sets of rules. Technically, it's like its own separate county, a bit like the Vatican.
Wow.
See if you see?
Right.
Now it is one of the richest square miles in the world. It's the financial district. So to be perfectly honest, I think they keep the rules as complicated as possible because they don't want us to know what's going on down here. This is where all the money is made. The significance to Jack the Ripper: 2 separate police forces.
Oh!
Metropolitan Police, responsible for the 30 boroughs and the City of Westminster. The City of London, responsible police for the 1.1 square mile. 2 separate police forces.
That didn't go well. I don't think that went well.
Police work closely together today, but through forensic science and computer science. But in 1888, Victorian London, both police forces were in direct competition with each other. These guys would not even be seen on the streets together. So if a murder took place in the city, the Metropolitan Police wanted nothing to do with it, and vice versa. Another reason we believe Jack the Ripper evaded capture. More on that to come shortly. That's it. We're going to start now, though, the double event. That's it. Elizabeth Stride, the only non-English victim of Jack the Ripper. She came from Gothenburg in Sweden. Moved here at 22, married a local man, John Stride. To cut it short, they were reasonably happy. Everything was going well, but he died young, as so many men did in the East End. Hard drinking, hard living, hard working. The lifespan of a gentleman in the East End of London, mid-30s. The West End, 50 years of age. For whatever reason that night, she's working the streets of Whitechapel. A bit like tonight, it's a particularly nasty, wet night. Gale force winds, rain, hail, a horrendous evening. The key to this story is a Russian Jewish man. Now, this is the crime scene today, but this is what it looked like in 1888. The key to this story is a Russian Jewish man. His name is Louis Diemschutz. He owns a pub. The pub is called the International Workmen's Educational Club. I couldn't make that up if I tried, my lovelies. He ran the pub with his wife. He lived above the pub with his wife. But on the weekends, he sold costume jewellery at market stalls all around London. He's returning that night on his horse and cart. He's heading down what's known as Duffield's Yard. Between these buildings, the stables are at the back of the pub. As he heads into that alleyway, the horse is on a loose rein. Halfway through in the pitch dark, the horse just stops, suddenly in its tracks. Louis Diemschutz is puzzled. The horse has made this journey a million times before, so in the pitch dark, he descends the carriage and he feels around for an obstruction. And of course, he feels a large mass or a bundle. So he bends down, strikes a match. Immediately in the gusty night, the match blows out. But not before he discovers there's a body of the woman in the alleyway. He said on the police report he thought it was his wife. Drunk on gin as he had picked her up from there, drunk so many times before. So still thinking he's dealing with his wife, he leaves the alleyway. He heads back into the pub to retrieve his oil lantern so he can come back and pick up his drunk wife. He walks into the pub. Who's the first person he sees? His wife.
So she's not dead.
He returns to the scene of the crime and he discovers the body of Elizabeth Stride. She has only one slit on her neck.
Wow.
No other marking. Her body is still warm. She has to have just taken her last breath. This begs us to believe that if in fact instead Louis Deemschutz had lit that match in front of him, he'd have been looking directly into the eyes of Jack the Ripper. We believe Jack the Ripper was disturbed mid-murder in that alleyway. Hence, only time for one rip of the neck. Something that terrified Louis Deemschutz to the day he died. Knowing if he hadn't thought that that was his drunk wife, then maybe tonight I'll be talking about the first male victim of Jack the Ripper. Because Jack the Ripper is in that alleyway. He's cornered like a rat. He's got nowhere to go. When Louis Deemschutz leaves that alleyway, it gives Jack the Ripper the vital seconds he needs to escape. And now we have a very serious problem on our hands. You have a frenzied psychopath with a brutal lust for mutilation of corpses and removing of organs that has not been satisfied. Jack the Ripper satisfies that lust 45 minutes later when he brutally mutilates Catherine Eddowes at our next stop, the infamous Mitre Square.
So, if he's doing it back to back, the chances of if he was able to finish his work with her, he wouldn't have looked for another victim.
That's the theory. That's the theory. And that's why the double event took place. But he is evidently escalating as well.
Were the organs missing?
This is brutal. This is one of the more brutal murders coming up.
Okay.
Because he's furious. Got it?
Guys, make sure you like the video. Let me
His
remind
reaction
you.
is too much.
I wish I could record my reaction at the same time, guys. But this is a good tour, and you know,
we shouldn't be laughing.
And I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm just to stop to bring things into perspective. Although you're watching this tour, it doesn't give you justice like walking the streets and seeing it for yourself.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Just walking down this place is so nostalgic from her storytelling, and just giving you this history about this place is amazing. So yes, check her out if you want to get the experience, all right?
And my channel.
And her channel. It's not enough just to watch the video. Go check her out, all right? And go support her, because this is amazing. This history is amazing. And if you want to see her again in another video, leave it in the comment section below, all right?
That'll all depend on whether they want me or not, though. All right?
I have a feeling you'll get some comments. All right.
Oh, bless you guys.
Cool.
Two police forces in London that still exist to this day. City of London Police, responsible for the 1.1 square mile. Metropolitan Police for the 31 boroughs outside. Now, it's a bit noisy.
Right.
Sorry, lovely.
Let's get right here.
Okay, right.
We'll move right
For
here.
any of you that are watching this that know about the borders of the city, just play along with us.
All right.
We've just left. The police work closely together today.
Right.
Through forensic science and computer science. But in 1888, Victorian London, both police forces were in direct competition with each other. These guys would not even be seen on the street together. So if a murder took place in the city, the Metropolitan Police wanted nothing to do with it, and vice versa. Another reason we believe Jack the Ripper evaded capture. Also, the lack of forensic science. No DNA analysis, no fingerprinting, no blood splattering. We're all experts nowadays as a result of CSI, Criminal Minds, and the amazing Dexter. The point I'm making, it was virtually impossible to catch a killer in 1888. But the one thing they agreed on was prostitution was illegal. However, they weren't unreasonable. They knew this was the only source of income for women in this part of town. So they agreed 2 rules with the prostitutes. Number 1, prostitute could not loiter or stand in the one position whilst working. She had to keep moving at all times. Number 2, the prostitute could not approach a customer. The customer would have to approach her. For that reason, up to 200 prostitutes a night continuously circled and worked around this church. This is where men came to solicit the trade of prostitutes. It's where Jack the Ripper goes next, because it's the last known sighting of the 4th victim, Catherine Eddowes.
We back again at another church, guys. I really think the person who did it was someone in the church. He used it as a way of hiding himself.
So there was an eyewitness report of who we suspect Jack the Ripper to be right at the top of this passage. So this is St. James's Passage now, but in 1888 this was called Church Passage. So we suspect after the murder of Elizabeth Stride, Jack the Ripper came straight to the prostitutes' church. Picked up Catherine Eddowes, negotiated at the top of that passageway what they called at the time the 4-pence knee trembler. Not 15 minutes later, her brutally mutilated body was found right down here in the infamous Mitre Square.
What is 4 pence in today's time?
I'd say roughly we estimate about £2. £2.
I would have thought it would be like 40 bucks or something.
£2 for a 4-pence knee trembler. It would have been £2 for a pint of gin, and the same amount for the Doss House accommodation. So right here is where the body was found. Here she is, actually. Let me show you here. I'll show you the images anyway.
Sorry.
It's all right. There she is, you see?
Okay. Wow. So they put a memorial because it happened in here?
Body was found right around here.
All right.
In what would have been at the time the darkest corner of Mitre Square. So what I want to do is we'll stay here, but we can project the images of what it looked like in 1888.
So it would have been real dark here.
Oh, horrendously so, yeah. No street lighting in 1888. Maybe a little shadow of a gas lamp every third corner you took, but you get the idea.
Right.
Dark, dangerous, and volatile. Let's head over here and I'll just project along here. That's the image you'd love as well.
Oh, wow.
So there's the gherkin.
What a beautiful... What this?
See, we're right on the border of the financial district. So you have Liverpool Street Station around here, the gherkin, the cheese grater, the electric shaver, the walkie-talkie, all in this area. Catherine Eddowes, bless her, she was a happy drunk. She's dancing on the street that night. She's apparently, according to police reports, impersonating a fire engine, going woo woo, attracting a large crowd of people. Don't judge. We've all been there on a Saturday night. She collapses on the street. PC Louis Robinson comes along. Police Constable Louis Robinson. He picks her up. He doesn't arrest her. He brings her back to the police station so she can sleep it off. He knows Catherine. She's been drunk several times before. That night, she's banging on the door. Let me out, I'm sober, I'm sorry, I'll never drink again, blah, 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 blah. He releases her, it's 12:50 a.m. She's going out the door, she said, good night, old cock, what time is it? He said, too late for you to get another drink, Kate. Not to worry, she said, I must go home. My husband will probably give me a beating. Gentlemen, by the way, it was legal to beat your wives in 1888, provided the stick you use was no thicker than the size of your thumb. Hence the term rule of thumb. She heads out and goes straight for the prostitutes' church. So where we are right now is Mitre Square. Mitre Square, right behind us, was warehouses full of valuable goods. And here's an image of it. In a neighborhood full of scavengers and thieves, this square required police presence every 15 minutes. The police officer on duty that night was PC Edward Watkins. He had been around here at 1:30 a.m. There was an eyewitness report of who we suspect Jack the Ripper to be, just where we were at the top of this passageway at 1:45 a.m. Now, look, we all have this kind of a Hollywood idea of what we think Jack the Ripper looked like. And it's due in part down to that iconic image by Alfred Hitchcock. You know the one. 6'2", long black flowing cape, deerstalker hat like Sherlock Holmes, cane. And my favorite bit is the mysterious, ridiculous fog always around the ankles. You remember that? Not the case. 5'7", 5'8", pale complexion, mustache, late 20s, early 30s, shabby genteel of foreign appearance, a shabbily dressed gentleman of foreign appearance. Foreign in 1888 Victorian London referred to the Jewish community. He's wearing a peak cap, a red neckerchief around his neck, and an oversized salt and pepper coat, grey and white coat, overall giving the appearance of an international sailor. Spotted speaking to her at 1:35 a.m. PC Watkins has been around here at 1:30 a.m. And when PC Watkins returned to Mitre Square at 1:45 a.m., he found the brutally mutilated body of Catherine Eddowes right where we showed you there. Jack the Ripper has taken his barbaric fury out on Catherine Eddowes. He starts again with the neck. Left to right, right to left. This time he removes 2 triangular pieces of flesh from her cheeks, the top of her nose, the tips of her ears. He plunges his knife into her genitalia, extending his rip above her breasts, pulls back her skin, removes her intestines, throws them over the left-hand shoulder. He picks out her large intestine and he wraps it around her neck. Jack the Ripper has removed and taken with him her uterus, and in an estimated 12 to 15 minutes in the pitch dark, with police presence every 15 minutes, he has removed and taken with him her kidney. Now, we all have some sort of a reasonable idea as to where our kidney is located, right? It's in our lower backs. When Dr. Bagster Phillips examined her body, he noticed that Jack the Ripper has done this in 12 to 15 minutes in the dark without damaging any other internal organ in the process. Dr. Bagster Phillips was the very first doctor to suggest Jack the Ripper had to have some surgical or anatomical knowledge. Hold that thought. I don't know how you're going to feel about this, Leon, or Ace rather, but I have some very graphic images of her post-mortem.
Yeah, we don't need to see them, guys. Sorry.
Are you sure you're fine?
Oh, my mother calling.
Oh, they always do, don't they? So these images, just a disclaimer. Now, I'm not entirely sure if Ace is going to use them, but these are the mortuary photographs of Catherine Eddowes, and they're pretty graphic. So if you are sensitive, now's the time to look away. I've had 15 fainters on this tour, and 12 out of 15 were adult men.
Wow. Okay, so how about I just film my reaction towards this thing? That way it'll be, you can still see, like...
Okay, so we'll start with the medical reports of her injuries. So here is the next one, the vaginal laceration.
Yeah, you can see he was fast with it.
And this one, this is a real photo.
All right.
And this one we actually believe he attempted to rip off her face.
Whoa!
And this one is just tragic.
Whoa, wow, 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 wow.
You see, you guys, that is the reality of Jack the Ripper. He's not some famed London historic East End character. These girls were daughters. They were mothers. They were victims of circumstance. And now, you have a crazed killer. He's running through the streets of Whitechapel. He's covered in blood. He's carrying a kidney. He has to be. He's murdered twice
and he's in
under
a rush.
45 minutes.
Right.
These streets are alive at night time. They're more alive at night than they are during the day. They're nocturnal. There's men coming home from work. You see a man coming towards you covered in blood in the middle of Whitechapel. Would you find that unusual?
You're right. Unless he's a butcher or something.
Very good, Ace. A lot of people don't remember that. Butchers. Not if he was a butcher. Men came home covered in blood every night of the week in Whitechapel. There was even buckets of water in the corner of the street so men could wash their hands of animal blood. Also, did you know the anatomy of a pig is pretty much the same as the anatomy of a human being? Was Jack the Ripper a butcher?
I don't know.
Could Jack the Ripper have been a barber? Barbers in Victorian London were members of the surgical guild. They were legally allowed to perform minor surgical procedures. There was no NHS. There was no National Health Service. There was no money for doctors. Gentlemen went to the barbers to have their blood released, their wisdom teeth pulled, stitched up after a bar fight. That's why the barber pole is still red and white, because it represented the white blood-stained rags they'd hang out to dry after surgical procedures. An anaesthetic in Victorian London was a shot of whiskey. As I say, they should come to Ireland. We're ready for surgery all the time. In Ireland, was Jack the Ripper a barber? We don't know. But what we do know is exactly where he goes next. There's very few clues in the Jack the Ripper investigation, but 1 hour later, PC Alfred Long, Police Constable Alfred Long, of the Metropolitan Police Department finds a triangular piece of the last victim's apron. Written in red chalk above that piece of apron up on the wall are the Jews of the men who will not be blamed for nothing. Spelt J-U-W-E-S. The Jews are the men who will not be blamed for nothing. Regretfully, there's not a hell of a lot I can tell you about it because there's nothing we know. Even to the FBI, it's known as the famous non-clue, but we'll discuss it. And we'll discuss the conspiracy theories surrounding it. So effectively, right now, we're walking the exact footsteps of Jack the Ripper after the double event.
What?
There you go. Just want to show you this, folks. You need to look at the image on top.
Right.
And look for the pattern. So that's the entrance.
You're right.
Now you got it?
Right.
That's the entrance.
Mm-hmm.
Jack the Ripper was in that building.
How you know?
Piece of Catherine Eddowes' apron was found on the floor. Last victim. Written in red chalk above that piece of apron up on the wall were the Jews of the men that will not be blamed for nothing. Spelt J-U-W-E-S. Detective Chief Inspector Aberline and Commissioner Charles Warren, this man, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Department, immediately instructed the Jews of the men that will not be blamed for nothing be rubbed off the wall. That, in modern day terms, is what you would call tampering with evidence. Why did he do it? He said he was afraid of any more anti-writing in the neighborhood. This building was predominantly Jewish. 1 hour later, Petticoat Lane Market would have been setting up around these streets, predominantly Jewish vendors. Wentworth Street behind here had 15 kosher butchers. He said he was afraid of any more anti-Semitic writing, but the people of London were furious. This vital clue has been destroyed. The City of London police, he's just murdered now in the City of London. Now they're involved. They haven't even seen it. So what's it all about, or what does it mean? We have no concrete proof that Jack the Ripper even wrote this. But a couple of theories. The FBI psychologically profiled Jack the Ripper, and they said he absolutely lived in Whitechapel at the time of the murders. They said there was no way he could have negotiated the streets of Whitechapel so quickly in the pitch dark without knowing exactly where he was going. I believe he temporarily lived in this building. That's me personally. We suspect he changed his clothes and he swiped the blade of his knife on that piece of apron. And they deduced from that blade swipe that the instrument that Jack the Ripper was using is the same type of instrument they use for amputating limbs. So at the very least we know he has access to surgical instruments. Quick recap. 31st of August 1888, the Autumn of Terror begins. Jack the Ripper strikes for the very first time. He murders Mary and Nichols. A double rip of the neck, vaginal laceration to the breast, and slashing of her intestines furiously. 7 days later, he strikes again. Annie Chapman, the eldest of his victims, 48 years of age. The first in daylight, her body discovered at 5:40 a.m. and the first where he harvests a trophy, removing and taking with him part of her bowel, her uterus, and 3 imitation copper or gold rings. Not another word from Jack the Ripper for 3 whole weeks. We have the infamous double event, starting with the Swedish prostitute Elizabeth Stride, and 45 minutes later, the brutal mutilation of Catherine Eddowes at Mitre Square. Not one more word from Jack the Ripper for 6 whole weeks. 9th of November usually falls here in London on what's called Lord Mayor's Day. The new Lord Mayor of the City of London is paraded past St. Paul's in this wonderful gold ornate carriage. All the King's horses, all the King's men, the Prime Minister, the members of Parliament, they'll all attend. Doesn't affect these people, they're not invited. But it's a bloody great excuse to have a party. Bless them. They've had enough. Their lives were so difficult. And now they had 5 months of paralyzing fear. Every corner they took, they knew Jack the Ripper could be there. They needed something to celebrate, something to remind them why they were alive. So their flags are going up in the streets, they're brewing the gin, they're handing out the free beer. When on the morning of the 9th of November, 1888, the discovery of the body of Mary Jane Kelly. Ladies and gentlemen, all of Jack the Ripper's victims were between 38 and 48. Mary Jane Kelly was 25 years of age. He mutilated her beyond all recognition. The only way she could be identified was by the clothing she was wearing the night before. Still to this day described by the FBI as one of the most complex crime scenes in history. It was also the very first forensic crime scene photograph in history. And why? Well, we all know he's escalating, but this was the first and only murder indoors. Jack the Ripper had all the time in the world to fulfill his fantasies and create his masterpiece without looking over his shoulder and without the fear of getting caught. 9th of November, 1888, the final murder of Jack the Ripper. Follow me. So you guys, between these 2 goal lines is where we suspect Dorset Street was located.
This is the same street
we were talking about. The most dangerous street in London, making it at the time the most dangerous street in the United Kingdom. Mary Jane Kelly's accommodation.
Excuse me, I have to stop you. You can't be filming the wrong places.
Excuse me?
Can on the other corner, not in this.
Right around the corner.
Yeah, you can't in this courtyard, I'm afraid. I understand you guys represent an important part of it.
Well, this
I'm
is
just doing my job.
All right, guys. So we had to leave because it's, I guess, the security, new security. But the street we were looking at, that line actually comes out that door right there. So it comes out here, which brings us back to this building that we were at, where I guess people, if they don't got the money, they can stay at. Just to give you the idea of the area.
Regretfully, there's no known image of Mary Jane Kelly. In fact, it's quite sporadic, the information we have of her. All we know is that she was an Irish girl from County Limerick. Let's just say poor old Mary Jane Kelly had delusions of grandeur about her prostitute career. She thought she was better than the rest because she worked in a brothel in Belgravia, quite a posh neighborhood here in London, for 3 weeks under a Parisian madam. For that reason, she wanted to be referred to as Marie Jeanette. This is Dorset Street. The street ran right through that building here, the most dangerous street in London. Mary Jane Kelly had a boyfriend. His name was Joseph Barnett. They had a tumultuous relationship. They were on 1 week, they were off the next. He wasn't around that week. A pane of glass had been broken at the tiny square room they'd shared. In an argument, she had stuffed it with newspapers and rags. She was 29 shillings in arrears and rent to a horrible man called John McCarthy. You did not want to owe John McCarthy money. In a desperate bid to appease her landlord, She arranged to meet a client that night inside her accommodations. Something she rarely did. She always turned her tricks on the street. She was seen leaving the 10 Bells pub in the company of a stranger. She was heard singing an Irish lullaby at 2 a.m. in the morning by her neighbour upstairs. She was heard singing again at 3 a.m. in the morning by her neighbour upstairs. John McCarthy sends his muscle, her landlord, a man called Thomas Boyer, around to the address that morning to retrieve the 29 shillings she owed. He knew she wouldn't have 29 shillings, but he was sent to get whatever he could by any means necessary. He's banging on the door, there's no response. He keeps banging and banging. I'll catch you hiding, Mary, I know about that broken window. He goes around to the side of the building, he pushes in the rags, he looks inside, and his knees buckle, trembling in terror. The first policeman on the scene refuses to enter the crime scene, as does the second. The third policeman enters and slips on the blood. What's left of Mary Jane Kelly is lying on the bed. He's almost entirely severed her head. He has removed both of her breasts. One is on the side table, one is found under what's left of her thigh. He has practically cut her body in two, taken out her intestines and hung them like trophies on picture frames all over the room. Her heart is missing from the crime scene. It has never ever been recovered. Her lungs, her uterus and her kidneys are found at various parts of the room. Her spleen is found on the side table beside her breast, and he's not done yet. Because now he takes his blade to her skin. And he almost entirely skins what's left of the front of her body, including her face. He even folds that skin in neat piles and places it beside the breast and spleen on the side table. This is the first forensic crime scene photograph in history. Now, it's pretty graphic, so maybe you could link it instead of showing it, but we'll see.
I'll look at it, guys. You'll see my reaction.
Who was Jack the Ripper?
Ooh.
Now that's the original, but an updated image and pixel is underneath.
Woo!
There has been over 300 suspects in the Jack the Ripper investigation. You could narrow it down to the 10 most popular. I'm going to talk about 2, but I also want to go through some of the more popular. Aaron Kuzminski, Polish paranoid schizophrenic ex-butcher. Lived in Whitechapel, fits the physical and the psychological profile of the FBI. He was arrested several times for violent crimes against women, even in an attempted slashing of his own sister. He's picked up a little later than he should have been, and the murder stopped. He is on the top 3 of every ripperologist in the world. To be honest, Ace, it's most likely Aaron Kuzminski. Montague Druitt, ex-school teacher, ex-banker, fits the physical and the psychological profile of the FBI. His own family swore he was Jack the Ripper. He commits suicide. He throws himself into the River Thames. The murder stopped. Walter Sickert is coming up twice. Walter Sickert was a very famous impressionist artist. He lived in Whitechapel, but he also lived in Camden. One of his pieces of work drew the attention of the authorities when down to the very last detail. It drew the attention of the authorities because it was exactly the same as the crime scene of Mary Jane Kelly. He is Patricia Cornwall, the famous crime author, Jack the Ripper. She's invested £5 million of her own money in this investigation. She's convinced it's Walter Sickert. He's coming up again in the Royal Conspiracy. So the Royal Conspiracy centres around this chap here. Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avon, the grandson of Queen Victoria. Same succession to the throne in 1888 as Prince George is to this day. He loved his prostitutes and he loved the brothels of Whitechapel. He came in here all the time dressed in disguise as a commoner. Queen Victoria finds out, she is furious. She sends him back down here because he's a very talented artist. And she entrusts him with the royally connected famous painter, Walter Sickert. Keep an eye on him, distract him, keep him away from the brothels. Whilst he was here, he falls in love, they say, with a prostitute, and her name is Annie Crook. And she falls pregnant with the future king or queen of Great Britain,
Oh my God.
a prostitute mother from Whitechapel. Now Queen Victoria is furious. She sends this man, the royal surgeon, into the streets of Whitechapel to fix the problem. William Gull, the royal surgeon, was 72 years of age at the time. He had suffered 2 very debilitating strokes 2 years apart. Personally, I don't think it's possible, but here's the story. He comes into the streets of Whitechapel. He finds the prostitute. He puts her in a mental asylum. She's never heard from again, nor is the royal baby. But they also say one girl finds out about the royal baby, and her name is Mary Jane Kelly, the 5th victim of Jack the Ripper.
The young one. The last one.
The last one. And she tells her 4 friends: Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, and Catherine Eddowes. They say there's an elaborate plot by all 5 girls to bribe the royal family about this royal baby. It is also said William Gull entices these girls into a royal carriage using poison grapes laced with opium, and he murders them in a royal carriage. And that bit, I can tell you forensically, is nonsense, and here's why. The FBI profiled Jack the Ripper as being a white male, late 20s, early 30s. Would have lived in Whitechapel, would have been full-time employed Monday to Friday. All the murders took place on the weekends. An obvious misogynist with a deep-seated hatred of women, possibly coming from some form of sexual abuse involving a close female relative. Would have lived in Whitechapel, would have been known to the police, would already be on their radar, maybe picked up once, if not twice. Would also suffer from some form of impediment, speech, limp, or impotency, something he kind of obsessed over. But more importantly, they said those girls were murdered exactly they were found, and not in any royal carriage. Now, I'm not saying William Gull's not involved, but he'd need a younger man. So Jack the Ripper for me will always be. You'll have to check out my channel to find out, ladies and gents. Tours by Foot London. Thank you for joining me.
I think it was somebody at the church. Guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more of this beautiful woman and more of her story, she does more tours. Come over here. What other tours do you do?
I'm coming.
What tours do you do?
Everything, anything they want. Graveyards, rock and roll, food tours, Westminster tours, changing of the guard, City of London, everything.
All right.
Literally. It's all on my channel. It's all on my channel.
Her contact and her channel will be in the description. Go check her out if you are coming to London and you want a proper tour, okay? Because you're going to get a proper tour. You see what she did? She's going to give you something amazing, something to remember. If this was a memorable video, go check out my home girl. She's going to get you right, okay?
An absolute pleasure working with you. You're a gem. Thank you, guys. If you have enjoyed the tour, my name is Sinead. And if you haven't enjoyed the tour, my name is Jose. Thank you very much.
All right, yeah.
Now